Okay, welcome back everyone. This is Tak Oda, CIO of Attaché for Business, and I've got here with me again Lesa Hammond. And we're going to continue our conversation, if that's okay, Lisa, about the hiring process. Last week we talked about the pre-interview questionnaire, and I think finally we're on to the interviews, all right?
We're on to the interviews.
Okay, all right. So what do you wish people knew about doing better interviews?
Well, let's see. I think that the first thing in interviewing is it's really important for a small business owner, particularly who hasn't been used to interviewing. One of the things that's particularly important is that they ask the same question of everyone they're interviewing. And the reason that they do that is so that if there is any challenge to the interview process where somebody comes back and says it wasn't fair, then they have the ability to say, look, we asked the same question for every person. And they should record what the answers are to that person and in kind of the same way. So either they record everything the person says, which is really kind of a pain and you don't want to do that, or they record just key things that the person is saying. And if
Hmm.
they do that for every person that they interview, then they really can address any challenge that they might get.
All right, so I guess one thing that makes me wonder about that is if you're asking the exact same question, people are going to lead you in different directions for follow-up questions, right? What do you do about that?
Yeah, you definitely can ask follow-up questions, and you also
Okay.
want to leave some time afterwards to ask questions that are specific to the person.
Oh, gotcha.
So
Okay.
you want to look at their resume and then any of the questions that you ask in the pre-interview questionnaire, then you want to be able to go back and really, dig down into those. But for the general questions that you're asking, you want to ask the same ones to everyone.
Gotcha. So you start off kind of cookie cutter, and then you can follow up as needed afterwards. All right. Makes sense?
Exactly.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. What else? What else should we do?
I think the other part, I think the other thing that you want to do is you want to, and I always say this to people, you ask what's called a behaviorally based interview.
Hmm.
And with the behavior based interview, you're asking questions that give them the opportunity to tell you what they've done as opposed to this hypothetical what they would do.
Hmm.
I don't know if you've ever been in an interview where somebody says, tell me a situation when you had to deal with an angry coworker or
Hmm.
something
I've
like
had
that.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then so often people will say, well, if I had an angry coworker, I would. But you
Hmm.
really want to ask the question of, did you have to deal with an angry coworker? And if you
Hmm.
did, what happened? And what was the
Right.
outcome? And
Gotcha.
so, so you want to ask them that question. And if they go off into the hypothetical of, well, here's how I would do it, you want to say, no, have you ever had a time where you've actually done that? And if they go, no, I haven't really had that, then it's like, well, can you tell me a time when you've had to deal with an angry customer or somebody else who was angry with you? Maybe not a family member, but somebody else. And let them tell you, what they did and how they respond, what they did in that case.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense because honestly, people know what you want to hear and they can spin their hypothetical the way they
Hmm.
want to hear it, right? So it's a lot harder to make something up if it's actually
Exactly. They're going to tell you what they think you want to hear. Yeah,
that makes a lot of
exactly.
sense. Okay. Yeah.
And I think, yeah, the other thing that is really important is, doing that and then following up with that. And so, and there are trainings that go on for 2 or 3 days that show people how to do these behaviorally based interviews
Hmm.
because the common thing to do is not to follow through and do it that way. The common thing to do is to let the person just get by with just telling
Uh,
you, oh, here's what I would do, and then it's like, okay. And then what happens is the interviewer hears that that's what the person did. So it actually gives the person who doesn't give a real example an unfair advantage.
will you will you clarify a little bit there? So what
Yeah.
is the benefit there?
Yeah. So if you haven't really trained your ear to
Hmm.
listen for what the person actually did, then what
Hmm.
happens is they will say, well, what I would do is, and they would say what they would do, in the perfect situation. And your ear, if you haven't trained your ear not to hear that, to hear, that's a red flag. If you haven't trained your ear to hear that, you're going to hear, oh, here's what they did in that situation. They handled it really
Mm,
well. So the person who
mhm.
comes back and says, well, here's what happened and here's what I did. And I got a little bit angry, but then I remembered my, 3 principles of how to deal with anger. And then all of a sudden they're at a disadvantage because
Uh-huh.
they've told you the truth versus the other person who's given you this hypothetical.
Wow. Wow. It never occurred to me that people could just be tuning that out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's easy to you hear what you want to hear often,
Hmm.
even, and if you've been in those games where they say something and then they have people
Right.
repeat what was said, and
Right.
people hear what they think they hear with a lot of filters. And I mean, we could get into a whole diversity training over
Of
how people hear.
course.
So
Yeah, exactly. The biases are just sitting there waiting to pounce, right?
exactly. Exactly.
Wow. It's so it's so complicated. So what do you think would help people to train themselves? I mean, probably not everyone is going to be able to do a 2-day training on this.
Right.
Do you have any hints for people? Any tips for people to make sure they don't let that sort of thing slide?
I would recommend that you probably you put in the when you're putting the question down,
Mhm.
you put the beginning of the question of when I was, this is how they
Uh-huh.
should respond. So you're looking for those words.
Right, gotcha. I mean, you could even remind yourself in like little red writing underneath your question. Make sure it's not hypothetical, so you
Exactly.
remind yourself. Because I would definitely forget.
Exactly.
Okay.